This is Tirana's Acre Forward, the ag industry's most thought-provoking podcast. Listen to interesting people as we go in-depth into the issues affecting crop advisors, growers, and farm communities, uncovering the truth about the ag business and using technology to prepare for the unforeseeable. Ready to explore the future? Let's dig in.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Acre Forward Podcast. I'm your host, Mike DiPaola with Tirana's. I'm actually broadcasting from our Southern Command in the Carolinas here today, and I'm joined by a very special guest from Rake, Iowa. And that guest is Nate Eitzmann of Asmus Farm Supply. Nate, thanks for joining us today on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me. Harvest is fully underway here in our area, so it's an exciting time of year, seeing the fruits of our labor.
It's been a hard-won season, to be sure. Is there anything that stands out about the season right now for Asmus and for your growers as you look at this past season versus others? Is there something different about it? Just, how did it go? What do you think?
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out the most is the weather. We were really dry this year, so that's been on the forefront of everybody's mind for several months now, as we've been dry pretty much from mid-May on. So That's always a challenge. Obviously, we don't have any control over that, so we have to do the best with what we can. But that's certainly been something that's affected our yields, but by and large, I think guys are seeing yields that are maybe a little bit better than expected. So there's always some positives that come at harvest time, and that's one of them.
Well, it's always just like football. It's a game of inches, right? You just have to keep making progress and deal with the weather and the conditions that are in front of you. But having a good partner like Asmus Farm Supply helps you in the good times and in the tougher times actually maximize your opportunity. So tell us just a little bit more about Asmus Farm Supply, where it's located, what's different about working with Asmus, especially when you have a drier, tougher growing season.
Yeah, Asmus Farm Supply is located, the main location is in far north central Iowa. We are about a half mile from the Minnesota border, and we've got locations in northern Iowa and southern Minnesota. We are a family-owned independent business that focuses on self-applied customers. We don't do very much application, so our grower base is a little different than some retailers, whereas our customers are doing their applications on their own. So we service those guys still. We pride ourselves in service and providing them with knowledge of the things we sell them. So I think on a challenging year like this, where weather is at the forefront, there's things we can do with our growers to help them out, and maybe that means cutting your losses and not spending more, or there's stress mitigators that we can apply to these crops to help them handle the drought stress for a little bit longer than without. It varies on geography a little bit, on soil type and things like that, and what a grower's goals are too for their farm.
So there are a lot of companies that do the custom application and things like that. In your part of the world, for many of our listeners, if I could just have you describe the soil, and there'd be envy breaking through the internet when people think about the kind of farming and the cropping opportunity that's there. But you're saying at Asmus, you focus on the advice, the service, the agronomic expertise to support the growers that are pretty self-reliant, independent, understand what they need to do, have the means and the wherewithal to do their own applications. They have that investment. So they're working with you and your team really for that differentiator, for that agronomic advice, for the service, for the inputs, if that's fair to say.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not what I would call a cash and carry business where
Sure.
we don't have relationships with these guys. These are growers who, like you said, are looking for more. I mean, they're very smart individuals and operations, very good business owners, but they're always looking to get better too. So they come to Asmus Farm Supply for that information and knowledge and product lineup, whether that be products or services,
Sure.
to help them out and push their operation to the next level. You
So
mentioned
yeah, go ahead.
our geography, our soil type, or whatever, but we are in a blessed area with very good heavy black soil. We can handle drought pretty well. There's always a tipping point. The majority of our ground is tiled because we struggle more with getting rid of water than not having enough, and our typical rain patterns treat us very well too, with some timely rains throughout the summer. But in general, we can hold moisture really well and fight through fairly sustained periods of drought. This year was maybe a little exceptional, but the amount of lighter soils, sandier soils in our area is very, very minimal, and it's usually isolated to like parts of fields, not entire fields or sections or anything larger than that.
Yeah, it's a great area to grow. It also brings different challenges when you have that. To further create envy across the Corn Belt in the South, what are the average yields? What can a grower expect for corn and for soybeans in your area?
Yeah, and that's yield numbers have gone up a lot here in recent years with a lot of advancements from hybrids and varieties, the genetic side of things to the product lineup that we're using as well. But I would say a good percentage of our growers are a little bummed if their corn is below 220. And beans, I would say, that number is probably 60 to 65, that if they're not over that, they're frustrated. So,
right.
And this year we're going to have some numbers below those, but surprisingly, we're having some that are right in there and maybe even above for areas that caught an extra inch or two of rain.
And that's really the difference it makes year in and year out. There are things that you just need to know and do different to really push to maximize the yields, but also the return on your investment. So in thinking about that and the season we just had, what are some of the ways? Obviously, we're here on the Acre Forward Podcast. We're going to talk about our tools and what we do so your growers and the audience can understand, it's not just a tool that you sign up and look at on your phone, but it's a partnership in the way Asmus and the advisors at Asmus are going to take a service. But before we get into that, just in general, what's in the Asmus toolbox for a grower that says, you know what, I need my inputs, I need a good partner, but I want a partner that's going to give me good advice. What are some of the things that Asmus brings to the table if I'm a farmer in Iowa or Minnesota?
Yeah. So, we've got a lineup of the necessities, we'll say, that most retailers have in some fashion. Your herbicides, your crop protection department, and those are largely similar across the Corn Belt. People have maybe a few differences, but by and large, that market is something that you can get anywhere, and it's still valuable. And I feel like the knowledge that comes along with that is maybe the bigger piece, with a herbicide program, for instance, where you can buy it anywhere, but do you know how to use it, when to use it, what's best for the weed spectrum you're dealing with, and those types of things. So we pride ourselves in having that extra knowledge that helps growers out to make those decisions on those types of things. And then in addition to that is some other enhancements, we could say, that help push your crop to a different level. And that starts at planting. That could be a seed treatment package, of which we offer several, an in-furrow fertility program, in-furrow biological program as well, some growth stimulant type products. And then some of those are offered throughout the growing season. There's things we can apply to these crops that are going to address some needs, whether that be fertility or some micronutrients, some nitrogen fixing products that are now becoming a little more popular. And then as we go on through the season, we've got fungicide options to help protect our crop. More nutrient type products can give the crop the extra little boost to finish it out and fill that grain yield out to its maximum potential. And so those are all things that I feel can be of value, and they're not here's the program, it's plug and play for everyone. Every farm is different, and every operation is different with how they've invested in their land. That could be tile, that could be fertility. So expectations are a little different. So you have to know the farmer, their operation, what a realistic goal is, and what we can do to get there. And we have other tools besides products that we apply that help us understand that. We do and promote management zones. So this breaks out the farm based on yield potential, which largely comes from soil types and the potential yield of each of those different types of soil. And once we have a farm broken down into management zones, we can really treat that farm the most efficiently to get the highest yield, the highest ROI possible. We don't need to apply extra product in areas we don't need it. And similarly, there's areas that it's just not as good a soil. It's not going to produce, and you can't fix that always. So it's maybe pulling back inputs in some of those areas, dropping your population, pulling back on inputs to try to keep from losing money in those zones. And then too, once you have management zones, you can determine not only you have yield potential based on your yield maps and soil maps, but you can soil sample based on those management zones. So you have good fertility knowledge based on management zones. And then we take that a step further. We offer DNA soil sampling that will tell us not only, so we can go beyond the nutrient part of it, and we can determine if there's rootworms, if there's soybean cyst nematodes, if there's seedling
You
disease.
can analyze the crime scene and find the DNA and understand where these yield robbers are, right? Not to get too cheesy, but you really actually get into forensic level analysis of what caused the result or what's holding you back on a part of your field. That's what you're saying.
Absolutely. And you can know before the season. I can go out in a soybean stubble field this fall and take these DNA soil samples, and this field's going to go to corn next year. I can know, even though it's a rotated acre, I know if there is a rootworm concern, which may change the type of seed I purchase, or it may
or treatment,
right. Or an insecticide applied at planting, and there's other diseases and seedling diseases as well that could impact decisions there. And also soil health is a part of this. So you can really dive down into what you've got going, and we're already managing sub field level. So we're doing this by the zone, and we don't have to over apply and do these changes to the entire field if it's not needed. So all these pieces help plug into that to create an efficient farm.
I think it's great. I think we've had a lot of advances, especially on the soil side of things and analyzing, understand what's going on. You're working with a pretty good partner to do that DNA soil sampling there on the field. And it's fine if you want to share, who that is and how you work with them. I think it's excellent, because the amount of advancements that we've had in seed and genetics and treatment. Now we've moved to another era in agriculture where it's really, how do we understand the soil? How do we understand the hybrids, how they interact in that environment, and how we understand our management practice and how we place a bet? And you're managing it at various levels. And it brings me to where we're at today, where we partner, Nate. And really, it's great to know the soil and this level of detail. And you need a partner that can understand that variable and those components. What we haven't had until recently, and some of your customers might be surprised to learn, I think about this, I think a game tape for your acre, right? Or we'll say you can FaceTime your farm or have Ring doorbell for your fields. It's really not an exaggeration. Up until now, without services like yours, you know the soil, you know what the machine said it did at planting, you know what the combine thinks it got. But between then, there's a lot that goes on. You mentioned weather. You mentioned how the different pathogens can affect the crop. The decision to choose a particular hybrid or variety, how did it get started? How did it react to drought? You know, so if you actually had game tape, just like the best athletes in the world do, it's not just for those that need improvement. We all can do better and improve. It shows you what you got right, and it shows you what you could have done better, right? Or what we didn't get right in the year. So just kind of talk a little bit about how the Acre Forward technology, I'm looking at your hat, it says AFS. That's for you, that's Asmus Farm Supply, right? For me, that's Acre Forward Services or Acre Forward Science. And you know, when you put those together, really, how does Asmus use the kind of technology? And for the listeners that don't know, what I'm telling you is throughout the season, working with Asmus on your phone, on your computer, on your iPad, your advisors at Asmus have access to a leaf level view of your farm. We're talking about imagery that shows the spots on a ladybug. And that means you understand the stand count, the weed pressure, the type of weeds, the species. You understand what crop got a good start, which one didn't, the nutrient deficiencies. Everything's automatically diagnosed. It doesn't replace an advisor. It just gives you the tools to really take that knowledge, like you're doing in the soil, but scale it across the management practices, the decisions, and how that crop reacts over time. How do you look at that? Why is this an important part of what you're doing? You know, what's your experience with that, with the farmers there in Iowa?
Yeah. The Acre Forward program from Taranis is something that we see as a huge benefit for our growers. And part of that, you mentioned the level of detail available from
Yes.
this imagery. I mean, that's what initially gave me confidence in this program, that you know there's imagery out there of all different types, and a lot of it's satellite imagery, which provides some value too. But when we can see an actual insect on a plant or holes from that insect feeding, it tells me that not only is this imagery really good, but it's reliable. And so I can start to trust it for all the other things it provides as well, you know, starting from stand counts all the way through nutrient deficiencies, fungal pathogens, insects, weeds, everything. You trust it after you see this imagery that this is reliable. And so the value that I see, as we talked earlier about having farms broken down into subfield level where we're down to management zone. So we're pushing to do the best we can. And just like looking at a field from a yield map doesn't tell you the whole story, you have to dive down deeper to each part of the field. And the same thing goes with in-season scouting. You know, I can walk a field, drive a field on an ATV and see quite a few things, but you cannot cover it all. And Taranis comes along and takes all these images and stitches them together and gives me a full picture of that field 6 different times throughout the season. I mean, you can't compete with that. There is no way I can physically tell you that good a story with my eyes. I can go out and ground truth some of that and gain more confidence in it, but I just can't. We can't scout the fields in that level of detail that Taranis offers us. So it's a huge deal in continuing to gain some efficiency and push our farms to the next level. maybe it's a good day and all our Taranis images show no problems. And that's good too. That's peace of mind. That's sleeping well at night, knowing we're doing the right things. But
Right.
inevitably, there's something out there that you can
Absolutely.
improve on. And it plays into um, our practice as well as not necessarily having to treat the whole farm. With Taranis, I can see that only this part of the field is deficient on sulfur, or only this part of the field has a weed problem, and we can go out and treat for that. We have application systems and mapping capabilities to do that. So it gives us an eye in the sky that I think gives growers a leg up on being a little more efficient.
I think having an eye on the sky, you know what's going on below ground. You understand a lot, even ground truthing with this kind of capability. When you see leaf level, it's virtually ground truth. You see it. What it helps people do, even things that are right under your nose, is it's taking more information than a human can see. It's analyzing it automatically, and it's giving you the chance to know before you go. It takes time to get out in the field. It takes time to see what's going on for even just one farm. And so as you do that, it changes how we work. But I think the science of this is what's interesting and what's changing. We're seeing across millions of acres, or just you're seeing this across your acres, is exactly how that hybrid got started. So now we can have a conversation about resource allocation for the rest of the year. If you've got 10 fields with a great start and 3 without a great start, you don't catch up a bad crop, but maybe your fungicide, your nutrition plan should shift to where you can maximize yield, especially in a tough season like this. I think about those things. I think about what are your assumptions around the treatment or how that crop responded. What I really like about partnering with Asmus is if you've got these zones in that DNA and you see stand issues or you see other issues in the field, even things like insect where the crop is stressed or more disease, you can actually compare those layers yourself, Nate, and understand all these dynamics so they can make a better choice for next year. And that's what's exciting, is this is the first time in ag where we can actually, with data, with visuals, put all of this together to say, we're going to improve for next year. We're going to tweak these things to make sure that 220 is now 240, right? We can make real jumps. That's what's pretty exciting. Why do you look at these technologies? Like, what's different about what you do and Asmus? Is it in the DNA for the Asmus company to do this? And why are you looking for these things for the growers, other than the efficiencies for you and your teams?
Yeah, I mean it is somewhat in the DNA for Asmus Farm Supply. That's kind of the way this company is built. But just speaking on my own behalf, I would say farming is competitive, and it's getting a lot more competitive when you look at the costs of things. The cost of land has skyrocketed, and that's probably not going to go down. So that alone adds a lot more expense into what these guys are doing. Then you look at the cost of equipment. It is not a cheap endeavor, and you have to be fully invested to go down this path of being a farmer. Sure. Just because of the costs of these things. And then you're throwing other inputs at this crop as well, and you are towing the line there of trying to just make a little bit of money on every acre. And some years are really good, some years not so much, but the competitiveness is something that really drives me to some of these technologies, because having that little extra edge for a grower is giving them the ability to pay that rent, to buy that next farm, to be able to afford these new combines and sprayers and tractors and things that they need to make them or keep themselves efficient and productive. So that part of it is something that I think really drives this. I think it'd be great if we could go back in time and everybody farmed 1/4 and we had all sorts of people living in rural America, but that's just not the case. So this is going to continue to become more and more competitive. And I think
I agree.
Every technology that we can utilize helps us become more efficient, more productive, and at the end of the day, more profitable.
No, I really like that. And I think growers hearing this, they probably see that as you're thinking about their needs, what they need to be doing, and how you can use every advantage, whether it's the advice, whether it's the input, to make sure that they're successful. And I also, yeah, it's hard to find people in rural America and in ag these days. And so we need to leverage and optimize and create the opportunities to see more and to do more, also to advocate for ourselves. I hear you speaking about this. You talk about using what we need, right? Your customers buy what they need, but they're using it in a very effective way, and they're only using what they need. And I think a lot of people outside of ag don't really understand the complexities of biology and chemistry and weather and the human factor, and even just the mechanics and the physics of doing these things. And they don't really appreciate or understand the amount of science that goes in to make sure it's a very deliberate act to know what we're planting, how we're feeding it, how we're keeping it safe. And there's really no incentive to waste inputs or to do things that are adverse to the future of that farm. And I think that's what this technology gives. And I think that's what's good about conversations like we're having is, while there's lots of farmers that listen, there's also people who are interested in technology and ag that are learning about these kinds of capabilities or that want to go into this industry. I think about Acre Forward and Taranis and a group like Asmus. Asmus must be a better place to work if you can start your morning with a cup of coffee and look at hundreds of thousands of acres and know where you've got successful stand, where you have more or less weed pressure, and really make a different decision. So how do you think about bringing people in? How do you think about the engagement with your growers as you look at this technology? It's bigger than just, oh, I've got a problem on the field, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, I think when you sit down with growers and you talk through some of these things that you can offer them, like Acre Forward from Taranis, like the DNA soil sampling from Pattern Ag, like management zones, all these things that they see that there's value in that you're not trying to sell them this product on every single acre. You're looking out for what's best for them to make them more efficient. And that creates some value and some trust in that relationship. And, ultimately that's what we strive for as a relationship between our agronomists and growers is that trust and that value added information that we can provide them. So by utilizing the technology that's available and these tools that are out there, that helps us become a more trusted, reliable retailer.
Yes.
And growers see that. Now, not every grower is just going to flock in the door because they hear you're selling this or that. It takes time. Right. You still have to build a relationship. And that's a very important piece, but there's a lot of talk and concern over the years of all this new technology is going to end the relationship and cut out the middleman. The agronomist and retail sector is under attack, but I disagree. I think it's still very much needed. And I think what differentiates retailers is there's always going to be problems out there on the farm, and farmers will come to the people with the ideas and the solutions to fix them.
I fully agree. I like that you mentioned other companies like Pattern Ag and partners that are successful. And for those listening, what you got to know is, there's been a history of software and things coming into agriculture trying to cut out a middleman, right? The obituaries for retail were written a long time ago, but that's not the case, because you have a group of people. We work together, we live together, we break bread together. We're on the volunteer fire squads, the baseball teams, the churches. So Taranis is one of the companies that from the very beginning, first of all, it doesn't make sense logic. It's not just that we're good people, but we understand that working with the advisors and the retailers and helping them help growers, we're actually reducing the inefficiencies, we're reducing the waste, we're reducing the confusion, and we're creating engagement, we're creating an opportunity versus cutting out a middleman and trying to take a piece of the pie. We want to build a bigger pie. We want to help people know more and do better. What's exciting to me is, if I'm hearing you speak, is I'd be the kind of customer that would look at you and say, you know what? You do care about what I'm doing. You're not afraid to show me what's happening on the farm. You're open, you do what you say you're going to do, and your follow-up is going to be good because I know you're looking at this and I'm looking at this. So the second I have a problem, I can hit my application, I can take a note. I can look at Nate and say, hey, this is something I want to talk about. Or this time of year, do we remember the start that a crop got? Do we really remember the weed pressure? We think we know as humans, but the reality is now you have game tape for your acre where in the combine, post-harvest meetings, you can lay everything out and really change what you're doing for next year to make sure that your farm is even more productive. And I find that I get excited. That's why I do it. I find it really exciting, but it's not just the technology. The technology changes what we know and what we can do, and it helps us farm in a different way. And that's something we haven't been able to say for some time, right? We've had advancements, but we're in a new era. And I really think the growers in Iowa that are listening, that are in your trade region, should take a look at Asmus, because just the two technologies you mentioned today, I think are game changers in the right hands, with the right advisor, with the right farmer, to really make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a good example of that this spring. We had a really bad rain event mid-May. We were probably 75% done planting. A lot of the beans were close to coming up, and we had 5 to 8 inches of rain in a single event, which led to some problems. A lot of crusting, and beans were slow to come up and just not able to push through that crust. It quit raining after that. So there was a lot of replant, and some of our growers who were utilizing the Acre Forward program, we could look at those fields and say, you don't need to go replant that whole field. This zone and this zone are fine. We have an adequate stand. Just replant here. So we saved some time and effort there on a replant situation that
Wow.
It's hard to paint that picture from the ground. You can do all sorts of stand counts, but determining where and when to shut that planter on and off is pretty hard. And it would take a insurmountable amount of time to accurately paint that picture.
Right.
What normally is happening is the easy button, just replant the whole thing. And we didn't have to do that. So those are types of things that these technologies can help with growers. They can help with us as a retailer to put our growers on the most productive path, and those types of things create value. And to your point earlier, the relationship with the retail and the grower is something that can't be brushed aside. And Taranis has seen that. And when we can provide them this type of detail on their imagery to really help make confident decisions, whether it's replant or applications later in the season, that's a big value. And these guys saw that. For
Right.
some of these guys, it was their first image they've ever gotten from Taranis, and it was a game changer on one of their main decisions, probably the main decision of the season.
But what's the yield difference? Even like we think of corn and soybeans, if you can, it's not where, even knowing which field you should go to replant is a challenge, and then where in the field. And if you don't have to rip out the crop, it's not just what you replanted, it's what you keep. The yield loss of planting back late, especially in a season like this, can be very, very costly. And so we think about that, but we can see it and you can see it, and you can demonstrate it in a way. So then the next question is, do I do that hybrid variety again next year? Do I plant it the same way? How do I look at that field? How do I get started? And so you can start making those changes. This is what's exciting. It's the technology is cool. Don't get me wrong. You see it. It's amazing. Click of a button on your phone. You can see a leaf. You can see the holes. You can see what's going on. The artificial intelligence tags, tells you, analyzes everything, right? And it's the only place you're going to get it. We've done this for some time, but the fact now that we live in an era where, Nate, your customers can come in and they know they're being taken care of like that. They know these decisions. Yes, we have insights at Taranis. Our Acre Forward technology and the insights are amazing, but they're only truly powerful in the hands of a good advisor that knows you, that knows how to work with you. And it's really professional grade. We always say Taranis is for winners. It's not for everybody. You have to know what you're doing. You have to understand the farm. You have to be committed to how you work. So what advice would you give for retailers that aren't competitive with you, that aren't in the area, that are looking at these technologies? What have you learned about Acre Forward and Taranis? How should it be deployed within the retail organization for success on the farm?
Yeah, I would say, you mentioned that it's not for everyone, and I fully agree. There's operators out there who have a program. They're going to do this. They're going to do this. They're going to do this, and they're successful. I'm not throwing them under the bus by any means, but in my opinion and experience with Taranis, I think you target the grower who is looking to push the envelope, so to speak. They're looking at good yields, great yields, but they always think they can do something better, and they're already resigned to the fact that we don't have to change every part of this field, but what's wrong with this part? Why is this always lagging behind? What's going on here? What little things can I do to gain a couple more bushels? Just always looking for that next improvement. Those are the types of growers that I think will benefit most from Taranis. And I think that maybe I should say that differently. I think those are the types of growers that will see the most value in something from Taranis. And excuse me, they will value what you bring to them. And when you sit down with that grower, or reach out to them in the season and say, hey, I was looking at some of your insights today. Take a look. We got something going on here. And they'll be all over that. And they'll appreciate that. And then, as you've mentioned earlier in this, at the end of the season, maybe nothing popped up throughout the year that was really a major red flag, required treatment, required action. But maybe we look back over the course of the season and they're saying, all right, let's look what's going on here. My yields were good, but I think we can do better. And so we have that picture from emergence all the way through of, okay, maybe these little things didn't quite tip the scale at the time, but maybe that's worth addressing in the future. So those are the types of growers that I think retailers should target Acre Forward with Taranis for, because they're going to see the most value. They're going to appreciate not only the program, but what you as a retailer bring to them with that.
Yeah. And what I mean by that, because, everybody has their way of doing things. This is professional grade. This isn't something you turn on and you put to the side. This is a way of working. It's a way of understanding. It's a way of farming. And for advisors and growers that embrace it, to your point, first of all, it's never perfect through a season. There's always things, and maybe you'd know about it, maybe you wouldn't. But it's the sum of the, success is the sum of the details. And you're going to see the little things that held you back, the big things that held you back, the big things that pushed you forward, and the little things that held you back like never before. You're going to understand it in a new way, but with a partner that understands it. I think that's another piece people don't think a lot about. The farmer's view and the advisor's view sometimes are not the same. But when you have a common place to start and you can really look at the visuals and you can look at the data and you can start making better decisions this fall for next year, you're putting yourself ahead. You're moving your acre forward, right? And I think that's pretty exciting. So before we get to the conclusion of our podcast and discussion, it's really great to have Nate Eitzmann here from Asmus Farm Supply. It's really good discussion. I'm learning a lot. Every region's different. For growers that are listening, what do you really want them to take away from our conversation today as they plan for next season and as they get ready for harvest today?
I would say, regardless of what your yields are this fall, every year is different and the weather is a huge factor that we can't control. But regardless of what they are, if you're disappointed, if you're happy, look at them. Look at what you've got going on. What more can you do? It might be a grower who's currently not doing any of the things we're talking about, and that's totally fine. Start with one. Start breaking down that farm. No matter how happy you are with your yields, look at them in detail this fall at what you did throughout the season and think of, is there one little thing I could have done to push just a little bit more? Because there's typically always something we can do to maybe gain a little bit of an edge. But that's what I would encourage growers to do is, it's okay to be happy with your yields, but take a look at them and see what else we can do going forward, because good is awesome, great is better.
Absolutely. Good is awesome, great is better. Nate Eitzmann at Asmus, working every day to move the acre forward, to make sure that they have excellence in all of their decisions. Like we always like to say here, Taranis is for winners, but talking to Nate, maybe there's an Eitzmann trophy for the best farmer that's out there. I listen to Nate. We know you, Nate. We like working with you. Farmers that are working with you, they understand that Asmus is dedicated to top-notch service and moving that acre forward. And you're taking a huge step forward with these technologies. So I want to thank you today for taking the time, talk with us, visit with us a little bit about the things that you're doing and what you think farmers should be considering as they go into next year. Thank you, Nate.
Thank you, Mike.